Unboxing and setting up the sharkjack, this time on Hak5. Hello and welcome to Hak5. My name is Darren Kitchen. It's your weekly dose of Technolust, and today we are unboxing and setting up the sharkjack for the very first time. We're also going to go through attacking with the payloads. We're going to go through setting it up in arming mode, getting connected, learning the file system, setting up your payloads, exfiltrating your loot. We're even going to get into where to get payloads, how to adjust those payloads, how to load them, some of the helper scripts, the sharkjack.sh, as well as updating the firmware, using the new web interface, even connecting it to Cloud C2. So stick around. I'm going to put time codes at the bottom. So if you want to skip to any of those sections, there's going to be links in the description. And if you're new to this and you're just saying, wait, what sharkjack, what? Go and check out the other videos on what is the sharkjack. But with that said, let's just go ahead and dive right in because I'm so excited. I just got literally in the mail a sharkjack. Here we go. This is literally from the Hak5 warehouse, and we're going to go ahead and unbox this together. So there we go. We have our little safety card spelling out some of the important things like the LEDs there, the charging ports there. This is the switch. And go here to get started, hak5.org/shark-setup. And then this is important safety information about the fact that it's got a lithium polymer battery. And you should, of course, read all of these important safety thingies because, safety is sexy. So there we go. That out of the way. Let's head over to the sharkjack itself in this little tin. And all we have to do is depress this little tab and pull off the cap. There we go. And so the first thing we'll want to do after reading all of that important safety information, which you can find not only in that card, but you're also encouraged to come over to the documentation. If you actually just scroll to the bottom of the sharkjack page, you're going to find a bunch of articles on getting started, which you can read to your heart's content, as well as some of the featured payloads and the links to the documentation. And in the documentation, important safety information. But the essence is we're going to unbox it, we're going to charge it up over USB-C, and then we're going to get started. So let's just go ahead and do that. I have a little USB-C cable right here ready to go. And with the switch in the off position, which is the furthest back, we're just going to plug that USB-C in. I'm going to put this cap back on just because it's going to make things a little easier to see on camera here. When it starts blinking, after a few seconds it will start blinking to indicate what it's doing. And this green blink indicates that it's booting. It takes about 30 seconds to boot, and then we're going to get some different colors to describe what it's doing. Again, from the instruction card here, we'll see on that switch there are 3 positions. The furthest back is off. The middle position is your arming mode, and that's how you get your loot off of the device or your log files as you were, as well as loading the payloads. And then the far forward position is the attack mode position, and that is going to go ahead and execute your payload. And we get our status from the actual RJ45 jack here, which is kind of nice. So this blinking blue indicates that the device is charging. And when it's fully charged, it will go solid blue, and then it's safe to unplug. And of course, as you recall from that important safety information, you don't leave LiPo batteries charging while unattended. There you go. All right. So we'll leave that there charging for just a moment as I describe the rest of our setup here throughout this video. So this is a USB Ethernet adapter, and that right there is connected to this Kali Linux box that we're going to be using for a demonstration. Of course, this is going to be very similar if you're on a Mac or if you're on Windows. I just decided to use a Kali box for this particular example. And then this other RJ45 extension cable is actually just plugging into my network. So we're going to just use this as our target or our victim network so we can test out some of these payloads. So that's the unboxing and the setup for the most part. Let's go ahead and dive right into actually attacking with the default payload, because out of the gate, this comes with a beautiful and simple payload, which just does a basic Nmap scan of the network, giving you visibility into what other devices are there. And we don't have to touch a thing. We can just go ahead and execute this payload. Let me show you how. So let's, oh, hey, it's solid. All right, cool. So our sharkjack is fully charged now. So with the switch in the off position, I'm just going to unplug it. I'm going to take off this cap here. and we'll plug it into our, well, we can either plug it into the victim network first and then flip it into attack mode, or we can flip it into attack mode first. It really doesn't matter. It's just preference. And I'm going to show you what some of these LED codes mean so that you understand. And this is, for the most part, similar no matter what payload you choose. So if I come back over here, our switch is in attack mode. Our LED is indicating a green blink saying, hey, we're booting up. So under the hood, this is a little Linux sock, and it's just booting up, and we'll, all right, so it's almost done booting. When it goes solid green, it'll go off for a few seconds, and then the payload is executing. Now the payload goes magenta. Magenta is LED setup. There's a whole scripting language, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But for the most part, magenta is usually used to describe that the payload is setting up services, whatever it is that it needs to attack. In this case, it's ready to go. It's waiting. The sharkjack is just waiting to be plugged into a network to get an IP address from DHCP so that it can go ahead and scan the target network. And that's what this magenta means. So we could actually have this as a pen tester in our pocket, flip the switch, wait for it to go magenta, and then we're ready to plug it into the network. Saves us just a little bit of time when we're near that crucial RJ45 jack. We plug it in. You're going to see that magenta is going to change colors once it gets an IP address from DHCP. There we go. And it's blinking to indicate that it is now scanning the target network, running that simple Nmap payload that's based on the device by default. And if we come back over to it, we're going to have to look closely. It will finish with a LED finish command, which is that right there where it goes green, and then it'll turn off. There we go. That was it. And now we're safe to unplug and safe to flip it into the off position, and that was it. We've now attacked the network, as it were, using the default Nmap scan payload that comes preloaded on the device. So let's go ahead and take a look at this now. When you were like, all right, cool, scan the network, how do we get the goods? How do we get that log file, or as we lovingly call it, loot? And we do that by switching the device into arming mode. So if you're familiar with some of the other Hak5 devices like your Bash Bunny or your Packet Squirrel, you may be familiar with arming mode. It's how you configure that device, how you get the loot off of it, and how you put payloads onto it. And so let's go ahead and get into arming mode now by flipping this switch to the middle position. Nope, hang on. You just got to gingerly, boop, there we go. That's the middle position. And again, let's take a look at the LED patterns that this is going to indicate when you go ahead and flip it into that position. So the first few seconds, it doesn't do anything, and then the LED comes on and blinks green to indicate that it is booting. And we could plug it into our computer at this point, or we could wait until it's fully booted. I'll just go ahead and plug it into our computer. Yeah, there we go. We can still see that LED blinking. And what's going to happen here is, okay, it finished booting, goes silent for a moment, and now it's going yellow. So that is LED yellow blink to indicate that it is in arming mode. Now, here's the cool thing about arming mode. We can also plug it into our USB-C while it's in arming mode, and now you'll notice that LED goes blue. And actually, it's gone blue solid. It would otherwise, in arming mode, do blue blinking, but it actually does solid in this case because the battery is pretty much fully charged, which is fantastic. It didn't take long to charge this thing at all. All right, so it's in arming mode. It's being charged currently. Let's go ahead and connect to it on our Kali box. So I'm going to go over to our network manager. You'll see I have this USB Ethernet connection. It's currently on. If I ifconfig, you'll see I have a few different Ethernet interfaces. Now ETH2 is going to be the interface for our sharkjack. I don't know, it's going to be, might be different for you, but what I'm looking for is an address in this 172.16.24 range. So the sharkjack is going to live at 172.16.24.1. We got an IP address from it on that range in .133. It's a 255.255.255.0, so it's a /24 network. It's a very small network. It's literally a network of one. It's, the sharkjack is the server and our computer is the client. But there we go. We get an IP address from the shark. So let's go ahead and SSH in and see all the good stuff. So if I just do SSH root at 172.16.24.1, I'm going to see that, hey, I've actually connected a sharkjack to this computer before because I do a lot of development. So it actually tells me that all I have to do is run this command, and that will remove it from my known host file. And at this point, I can SSH back in. You probably won't have this unless you've been testing a lot of sharkjacks like I have, but for the most part, that's what you do. All right, the password by default is Hak5 shark. You are encouraged to not only appreciate the beautiful shark ASCII, but also run passwd to change that password so that's unique to your device. All right, so let's go ahead and navigate. ls, where are we? We're in /root, and there are two folders in /root that you need to be aware of. There's loot, and there's payload. So if we, oh, of course, and then there's a version file. So cat version, we take a look at that, and it is by default running version 1.0. Great. So let's go over to our loot directory and take a look. There's an nmap folder in that loot directory. And take a look, and hey, look at that. We've got some nmap scans. It's cat nmap scan number 2. And there we go. That's a bunch of different devices. We see a Belkin, we see an Epson, we see VMware, we see a Google device. There's a bunch of these different devices. Hey, look, there's a printer. Brother, great. So that was the nmap scan that we literally just ran. We can actually see what the payload is doing if from /root we go into our payload directory, and we'll see that we have a payload.sh file here. So this script here is our payload. We can cat it, or we can use vi to go ahead and take a look. And this, as you can see, is the sample nmap payload for the sharkjack. It's version 1.0, and it kind of gives you an idea of what the different lights are doing when it sets up, and you can even change some of the options. So the default option is to use nmap tech lowercase s capital P, and this is where it's going to save the loot. And feel free to go through these. They're basically bash scripts that have a few different helpers, like your LED attack is what's going to make it set the LED to yellow, and we can get into some of those things later. But for the most part, it's bashed with a few helpers, and that's how it works. So let's go ahead and quit out of that, and we're done. I mean, we have now successfully connected to our sharkjack. So for instance, if I wanted to get those loot files back down to this machine, let's make a directory here called loot. And if I wanted to copy those from the sharkjack, I would use scp root at 172.16.24.1 :/root/loot/ you know what, we'll do star. I'm going to do scp-tac-r, which will do recursive, so it'll get all of the directories and everything. And then where are we going to save these? To dot. That little command right there with our new password is going to go ahead and download all of the loot. So it's now on our machine locally on our Kali Linux box. So there you go. That's pretty much it as far as getting exfiltrating your loot down. You get the idea to just do that in reverse to put a payload up onto it. So in that case, if we had a payload.txt or .sh as it were, here you would just do scp payload.sh root at 172.16.24.1 :/root/payload, and that command, assuming there were a payload.sh in this directory, would go ahead and copy it over to the sharkjack and overwrite whatever payload is currently on it. That is a lot of what the sharkjack is in of itself. And so now you know how to exfiltrate your loot. Now you know how to load your sharkjack. But let's go ahead and talk about some ways to make things even easier. So if I come over here to the Hak5 site, you'll notice that we also have not just the documentation, which will kind of illustrate how to do the various things like we talked about, the LED patterns. Those are all documented here, as well as the the basics. So I encourage you to go ahead and read through this to get a better understanding, of course. But just to dive right in, I also want to point out that the Hak5 Download Center at downloads.hak5.org is where you can also get all sorts of nifty stuff for the sharkjack. So here's sharkjack, and we've got sharkjack firmware, and sharkjack tools. So let's go ahead and focus on the tools for right now, and we'll talk about the firmware. So the tool is sharkjack.sh. It's available for Linux and OS X. And I'm just going to go ahead and download this, and we will save it. And that puts it in, okay, our downloads folder. Great. I'll go ahead and there's our sharkjack.sh. Let's just go ahead and make it executable. And let's run sharkjack.sh. And there you are. Again, cute little ASCII as well as some helpers to allow you to get connected to your sharkjack, to upgrade the firmware, to push a new payload up to it, and to get your loot off of it. And so this is just a little aid if you don't want to have to remember those SCP commands and SSH and all of those things. But it also makes it really easy to get your firmware upgraded, which is what we're going to be doing next. If you recall, we catted that version file on /root on the sharkjack, and it was 1.0. because that's what comes at the factory, because that's when they were made. But if we look back over on downloads.hak5.org, when this video is made, version 1.1 was available. So we'll go ahead and flash that latest one. So first, let's try connecting. We'll hit C. It's going to wait for sharkjack to be connected. It notices that there's a sharkjack, prompts us for the password, and now we're connected. Easy as that. If we run sharkjack.sh again, we can actually set up SSH keys for easy access. So if you've seen previous videos on Hak5 about SSH public and private keys, this automates that process so that you can, for instance, have a passwordless login or just a more secure login to your sharkjack rather than just using the password to log in as root. So that's kind of a nice little convenience. You can also, again, push a payload to it or get your loot from it. So we'll do, let's get our loot. Let's hit G. It's looking for the loot. We have to enter our password. And just as before, it downloaded our Nmap scans, and it probably saved it. Yep, it created a new folder called loot. And there's our loot stuff, just like we were doing before, but just kind of making it a little prettier for us. All right. So let's go ahead and upgrade the firmware, because I really want to show you some of the fun stuff that we can do. And let's just go ahead and get on the latest version. So in this case, let's first recognize that we have our sharkjack, solid blue, because the battery is fully charged. It's plugged in over USB-C right now, and it's connected to our computer. If we go back over to our computer and run that sharkjack.sh again and say U for upgrade firmware, and then D to download it from downloads.hak5.org, or you could also, if you have a local file, you could do it that way. We'll say D. It's going to go ahead and download. It's downloaded file. Okay, and this is very important stuff. It's saying, hey, make sure you've got it connected to a power source. Just like any other device that you flash, if it dies mid-flash, if it reboots, if you disconnect it from power, bad things are going to happen, and it's not going to be pretty, so you're forewarned. But that should really go without saying. But we said it anyway. Here it is. Don't unplug it from power while you're flashing. So we say yes to continue, prompted for its password, and what it's doing is it's copying the firmware file over to the sharkjack. And once it's done copying the file over to the sharkjack, it's going to go ahead and start upgrading the system. So this process takes about a minute, but through the magic of television, I'm just going to speed it up, and we'll see you on the other side. All right, our sharkjack upgrade is complete. So let's go ahead and just rerun that sharkjack.sh and hit C to connect. And at this point, it's important to note that our sharkjack's password will have reverted back to that default Hak5 shark, as opposed to the password that we set previously. So let's go ahead and log in. And we'll run passwd again to change our password. And if I ls, we'll see that we have a version. And our version is now 1.1.0. Now, one of the coolest things about sharkjack version 1.1.0 and beyond is that there's a nice little web interface that actually makes loading payloads and getting loot a lot easier than using the command line or using sharkjack.sh as I just showed you. So let's go ahead and check that out. If we, in arming mode, connected to our computer, head over to 172.16.24.1. We'll notice that we get a little web interface here, and we have a payload tab where we can see this is the payload that's running on the device. We can actually modify the payload right here and save it, and we can actually check out any loot. We don't have any loot on here, and that's another important thing to remember, is that when you update the firmware on your SharkJack, it's going to remove everything. It's going to wipe the entire memory. So if you had some loot on there, make sure you exfiltrate it, or back it up to your computer before you go ahead and with this process. And otherwise, there's some helpful links to the documentation and where to get payloads and downloads and such right from the web interface. So let's go ahead and load a new payload. I'm actually over here on the repository on our GitHub, and I'm just going to pick an example payload here, and it's going to be the SSH IP blinker. All right, so this payload is a pretty quick and easy, simple payload, and I'm going to show you how it can be pretty powerful in just a moment. So I'm going to say raw, and what I'll do is actually I'm just going to select all of this and hit copy, and then I'm just going to go over to our SharkJack web interface under the payload directory or listing there, and I'm going to delete all of that, and I'm just going to paste our payload, and then I'll just say submit. And that's a quick and easy way to update our payload. Now let's go ahead and run that payload. So we'll disconnect the SharkJack from our computer. I'm going to go ahead and unplug it from the mains since the battery is fully charged. We see that it's blinking yellow as it's in arming mode. So let's flip it to the off position and then far forward to the on position, or the attack mode position. So now it's going to execute our payload that we just loaded over that web interface. I'm going to plug it into our target network as that guy is booting up, and we'll see the green LED blinking to indicate that it's booting up. And then in just a moment, it's going to go ahead and start running our payload. And this is kind of a fun, exciting payload because it's a little novel and different, and you'll see how something as simple as this IP blinker can be pretty powerful. So it's finished booting up. Now it goes magenta to indicate that it's in the setup mode, and what this payload is going to do here is it's going to first try to obtain an IP address from that network, and then once it does, it's going to blink the last octet of the IP address with that cyan light. So you'll see here it'll do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. So what that means is the SharkJack got an IP address ending in .51 if it's an IPv4 network. So let's take a look at what that means to us. If we come back over here to our machine and do an if config, we'll notice that our network is a 192.168.86. Something, and it's a /24. So what that means is our SharkJack is now at 192.168.86.51. So let's just what this means is we can actually SSH over to it. We can even ping it. Here, let's ping 192.168.86.51. We get replies. So now let's SSH to root at that IP address, and there's our Shark. And so you may be wondering, like, okay, cool payload, it just told you the IP address that it got on your network. How is that useful? Well, as opposed to connecting to our Shark over SSH while it is in arming mode connected to our computer, it is actually connected to our network, and as such, since it got an IP address from DHCP as well as DNS and everything else, it's now on the internet. And what does that mean to us? Well, check this out. From the Shark, I can say ping an IP address, and it gets an IP. I can ping a DNS, and it that works great. So what does that mean? Well, it means that I can do OPKG update. Now OPackage is very similar to apt if you're familiar with Debian-based distributions, and it's the package manager for this OpenWRT 1907 based machine on here. And from there, that means that we'll be able to actually install additional packages from the command line just the same way that we would if it were our Linux box. So it's gone ahead and updated our packages. Let's go ahead and now do opackage, because here's the problem. If I do nano, the best text editor ever, it's not installed. But if I do opackage install nano, Now I have the best text editor on earth. How awesome is that? And that works with many other packages. So that's an example of how to load a payload using the web interface and go ahead and execute it. And in this case, it gives us the IP address blinking in this kind of cute little cyan LED. And I think that's kind of useful. There's so many more possibilities with this firmware, but now that we've demonstrated that, let's go ahead and do one last more advanced thing, and that is to connect our sharkjack to Cloud C2, and then we'll even demonstrate a payload that's going to take advantage of that so that we can exfiltrate our loot live in real time over Cloud C2. So if you're not familiar with Cloud C2, it is the web management dashboard for all Hak5 gear. It is self-hosted. There's a free community edition that you can grab at c2.hak5.org, and it's what's going to allow you to be able to manage not just your sharkjack, but also if you have a screen crab or a packet squirrel, a land turtle, or a Wi-Fi pineapple, all of those right from the web. So if we come over to c2.hak5.org, you can learn more about Cloud C2 and how it works, and you can go ahead and grab yourself a download. And I have it already running at h4k.cc on port 8080. I'm going to go ahead and log in and head over to our devices tab, and I'm going to go ahead and enroll a new device. So we'll add a device. We're going to call it Baby Shark, and we'll choose from the drop down the sharkjack. Add a device. We now have that in our listing. So we'll click into there, and then we'll click Setup. That's going to give us this file that we will then download. We'll save that file, and it's called device.config. So if we ls, I see now I have this device.config, and all we have to do is load that device.config over onto our sharkjack, and it needs to live on the sharkjack in /etc. So similar to before, we're going to scp device.config to root at, and here's where this is going to get a little different than norm. Remember, our sharkjack right now is on our network, not on connected directly to a computer over arming mode. So typically, if you're connected over arming mode, it would be at 172.16.24.1. It's not in this case, just because we're continuing to fly with these examples. So looking at our little blink pattern, we remember it's .51 on our network. So that would be root at 192.168.86.51, which is going to be totally different for you. Sorry, and then it's SCP, so you do colon where you want it to live, /etc/. And that has successfully copied that file over there. We can SSH over to, whoops, see now I'm doing it, 192.168.86.51. And we can go into /etc, and we see we have our device.config in that directory. And if we come back over to our Cloud C2, we'll notice that it has not been seen. It's not connected to our Cloud C2. So how do we make it connect to our Cloud C2? Well, our device is online. It now has its provisioning file, that device.config, and with the sharkjack, you actually have to use the command c2 connect, and then there's of course a c2 disconnect that will go ahead and connect to your Cloud C2. And you can use that in your payload if you want it to connect. It doesn't automatically connect. You have to manually invoke that. So let's just do that live. We'll do c2 connect, and that's now running. And if we head over to our baby shark in just a moment, we'll now see it's connected. We can click into baby shark, and we can right here open a terminal. And now we have a shark shell right from the web interface, which is pretty cool, because if this were plugged into anywhere, you can just manage it remotely, which is kind of nice, as opposed to just doing the SSH from your terminal. But in any event, let's go ahead and take a look at how a payload can take advantage of this connection to this Cloud C2 dashboard by exfiltrating loot. So if we go back over to our shell, it's kind of funny, we actually have a shell in both places. We can actually exfiltrate loot. Now, we don't have any loot right now, so let's just, do we? No. Let's just make directory nmap, and let's pretend we have loot. I don't feel like rebooting it and doing all of that stuff to show you the possibility there. So this is going to be a weird round robin. We'll actually we'll copy all of these. All right, so now I've copied loot over to the device. If we go back over to our web shell and go to cd to loot and cd to nmap, now we have loot. And I just did that to illustrate and save some time. You kind of get the idea. So how do we get this loot now from the command line or from our payload over to Cloud C2? Well, let's take a look. We have this little loot directory here, and loot streaming is enabled, but we don't have any loot collected. Well, let's collect some loot. So let's show you an example of how you can use C2 exfil to actually get the loot off of this sharkjack. So the command is C2 exfil. And then all you have to do is, well, if you run it, it's going to give you the usage. But what I like to do is run it with string, if in fact the file is ASCII, which makes it easier to read in Cloud C2, and then just the path to the file. So /root /loot /nmap, and we'll do, I don't know, the second one, nmap scan number 2. And then the last thing is we can specify the name of the payload. So we'll say nmap, and we'll see that it has successfully exfiltrated that loot. So now, if we go over to this loot tab, we'll see there's our file, and we can just go ahead and view it right there in our browser. So what that means is in your payload, you can do a C2 connect followed by a C2 exfil to exfiltrate the loot that your payload generates so that you can get it conveniently in your Cloud C2 dashboard. So, you know, I encourage you to check that out. In fact, many of the payloads already existing, we come over here, will actually do that for you. So for instance, this IP info payload, if we come down here, the very first line is Cloud C2 equals 0. If we were to change that to Cloud C2 equals 1, then it would go ahead and run this little function here where it does Cloud C2 connect and Cloud C2 or C2 exfil. So that's a pretty cool way to, you know, get even more out of your sharkjack, and I really highly encourage you to check this out. There's a free community edition, like I said, and also I encourage you to not just, you know, contribute payloads over to our repository, but also get involved over on the forums. You can find them at forums.hak5.org. You'll find a board specifically for the sharkjack, and I really encourage you to get in there and join the conversation. A bunch of helpful people, including myself, so please join the conversation. I would love to hear your thoughts. You can also leave those in the comments below, and that right there is the gist of getting started with your sharkjack. Mine here still blinking the IP address it thinks it has on my network. So I guess I could put some error handling in my payload to see if you've unplugged it, but that's, I don't know exactly what the use case is there. What kind of payload would you write? Leave a comment. With that, I'm Darren Kitchen. Trust your technolist.